Hi, hello, we're here, we're live on the AWS Twitch channel. Welcome to Building SaaS on AWS. The weekly, it's now weekly. Well, there was one last week, and there's one this week, and then there's one in 2 weeks. But the show that helps you build your next SaaS product on AWS or improve the SaaS products that you have at the minute. My name's Derek Bingham. I am a developer advocate at AWS, and I'm here today with Kevin. Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Kevin Hawkinson. I'm a solutions architect in worldwide public sector. I'm based in Minnesota. I work with EdTech and GovTech customers, kind of helping them design, build, validate, launch products, all that cloud native fun stuff. And,
Yep.
I like to say when I'm not staring at a computer screen, I'm probably staring at another screen, like either watching
Uh-huh.
TV or playing video games, sitting on my couch. I don't go outside that often.
Well, in Minnesota, isn't it pretty cold? I'm in Perth in Western Australia, so it's always warm. But my understanding is Minnesota's always cold. Am I right?
It is cold a lot, although I think it almost even gotten in the 90s, of course, Fahrenheit, because we have our own temperature
Yeah,
scale.
yeah. I
Um,
have no
but
idea what that
so
is.
we have like 3 months, 3 months of the year where I think we can go outside. But
Nice. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. So thanks everybody for joining us. Where's everybody else joining us from? So as we said before, Perth, Western Australia, Minnesota in the US. Where's everybody else from? Be interested to see where you are from. So this week we're going to talk about Amazon S3. So how you can leverage the power of Amazon S3 to build a multi-tenant SaaS solution. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But Kevin, you did allude to the fact that as well as not going outside, you do other stuff. So what else? What else do you do? You know, I like Star Wars. Do you like Star Wars?
yeah, you might be able to see from my over here, my shelf here. I've got the LP album from Star Wars from when I was young. I don't want to
Original?
really age myself, but I did see the trilogy in the theater. Okay.
The original in the
Yes,
theater.
I
Jeez.
saw the original in the theater, all the movies. So I look deceptively young. Um, so I like to do that. Like I kind of alluded to, I like to stare at screens. I like to play some video games. Um,
What are you playing at the minute?
right now, I have a lot of those free games you get, like, a lot of them I get from like Prime Gaming because I'm from Twitch and
Uh,
stuff.
nice
Um,
cross promo. Nice.
so yes, I get from there. Although I started playing, I've played a lot of Civilization in the past,
Oh yeah,
and now there's
yeah.
this game called Frostpunk that I'm playing, where it's kind
Mhm.
of like the Earth is froze over and you got to build some steam yards. It's a couple years old, but it kind of reminds me of Minnesota. So I decided I would try and get that up and see how that goes. So. Um,
Nice,
I
nice.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't played that myself. I find myself playing Horizon Zero Dawn a lot. Not Horizon Zero Dawn, Horizon Forbidden West. On PS5, I finished that the other week. That was fun. And I see we've got some people from Canada. We got San Diego. Hi, Bill,
Right.
and Idaho. So we've got for a show. So this show is going out in an APJ friendly time zone. Hence why I'm in Perth. But we've got a lot of North American viewers as well, which is cool. We are a global show. Um, so um, so Kevin, why? So we're on an APJ show, so and it's nice that we've got North American viewers, but why are you here?
Why am I here? Well, I came to talk about kind of Amazon S3 and kind of how to use it, stuff about it. Um, it's kind of like actually a fun origin story relating to my like AWS experience and Australia. come to
Oh,
think
yeah.
of it. So like when I
Nice.
was building my first AWS solution, I was working in a global company. They were really good at data centers. We had data centers in the US and the UK and Singapore. And we were launching one of our SaaS solutions in Australia. And the market demand was just, hey, we want our data in Australia. We have data residency issues. We've got latency issues. And we can't build a data fast enough or cheap enough. So that kind of really forced us to, even though we are good at data centers, to start looking at AWS and start building it. So I think if it weren't for Australia, I probably wouldn't be the AWS solution architect I am today. So thank you for
Wow.
that.
There you go. You're welcome. I will speak for all people in Australia and say you're most welcome, Kevin. It was our pleasure. So that's very cool, and nice little tie into the origins and what brought you to where you are today. So, as we were talking about multi-tenant, obviously, you had a customer story that brought you here. Because in AWS, I've worked myself in AWS for coming up to four and a half years, and there's infinite things to do, and we're always driven by customer needs and customer stories, and that ultimately drives what we do inside with the organization and with customers. Do you have a similar story or origin for your interest in S3?
Yeah, I right now I work with, of course, a lot of customers that are using S3 and building it, and it reminded me that when I was an early builder, again on AWS, on that same thing we were talking about earlier,
Yep. Yep.
we were getting our S3 set up for our tenants, and I hit the issue where I hit the quota and we couldn't create any more buckets. And that didn't, of course, just affect like our application, but it affect other people in the same AWS account, other utility buckets that needed to be created. Had to figure out, oh, how do we get the limit increased, all those things. So uh, I like learn that one, I think, the hard way. Again, it sounds like an
Yep.
easy service. It's one of the earlier service. Later on, you do your research and you realize, hey, there's no max bucket size or the number of objects that you can store in a bucket. And then you start understanding about quotas, and they're really guardrails to make sure you're well architected. So part of the reason I wrote this blog was to kind of help the current customers I have today, and also help all those people that are kind of building things new on S3 that maybe will follow the same path, and just kind of explain it and make it just a little clear there.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Given your experience, because I've run into similar quota experience, you actually know off the top of your head the quotas for S3, don't you?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Soft limit of 100, hard limit of 1,000, per account.
There you go. That's number of buckets in S3,
Yeah,
everybody.
it,
The limits
it's
brought to you by Kevin.
it's right there in the blog. I made sure to put it there. So
Yeah, nice. So it is. Yeah, for those of you, I've asked in the stream if anybody's used S3, because I'm interested in if anybody has any war stories from S3. Please share, because we are live and we're interested in how are you using the service and the product, and in what sort of application. But use yourself, Kevin. As S3 is a very large thing, a large service, and it does lots of things. Like you can host a web page on S3, is one of the use cases. But any issues that yourself have run into while you've been using it? You've obviously dived very deeply into S3. Any use cases or issues or paper cuts, battle scars that you're willing to share with the
yeah,
service?
I mean, in addition to the quota issue, I have run into the problem where I was trying to secure my S3 bucket, and I locked myself out by doing the wrong bucket policy. So
Yeah,
you tweak the settings, you're trying to lock it down, and you lock it down too much, and then you need to go find the root user in your account. Now that's a
yeah,
much better story to go tell somebody than I have a public bucket and I leaked all our data out there. So if I'm going to have a problem with security in S3, I'm going to be happier that I locked myself out and I let everybody on the internet in.
yeah.
So I think
Very,
those are
very
like
true.
getting security right is important and it's tough, which is actually why this multi-tenant blog and the story and just kind of understanding the concepts was so important to put pen to paper. Or
Yep.
so they say, right?
For sure. I need to share the actual blog. So we're referring to blogs a lot in the show, and I haven't actually shared the location. So I'll do that. I'll do that now because so that's the location of the blog for everybody who's watching. If you want to have a read of that now or save it for later. So yeah, my S3 story is very similar in that public buckets are very, very bad and should never be done ever. But then defining the access control and the right access control and access patterns per application is quite is tricky because when we think about security now, we're thinking about instead of shift left, we're thinking about where you apply security patterns and best practices in your CI/CD pipeline. We're thinking about more like start left. So where you actually, when you're designing your application at the start, you have security front of mind, which of course you then need to have an idea of access patterns. So my challenge when I'm building with S3 is make those access patterns flexible, so you don't know everything when you build an application up front, but you do know that it'll change because what you started with is not going to be what you end up with, and so building in security guardrails that are based on your access patterns that are flexible and you can change over time without having to start from scratch. I think that's key, and that's probably the one learning I've ever had on using S3. Yeah. So we have one person on the stream who's stored logs on S3 before. Data to attitude. Thanks for sharing your use case. Data to attitude. That's really great. And says it's pretty cheap. So what's the worst that can happen? So there you go. Yeah.
So I think what's interesting is when they're your own logs, the worst that can happen is people see something else. But when you're a partner of ours and you're building software on top of Amazon and you're storing data for other customers, for different sets of customers, you would hate to leak their data out to the internet or have them see each other's data when they come from different kind of companies or different sets too. So I think that when you're, like I said, building software other people use, you kind of got to take this extra care and make sure that is going on. But it's all about like understanding kind of the requirements, seeing what's changed, understanding your access patterns. If you have logs, yeah, maybe it's not as concerning because there isn't data in there. But
yeah, well, not everybody has obfuscated all of the
yeah,
PII data in their
yeah,
logs.
they
Yeah,
could see what's going on in there. So
yep, yeah, you gotta be
yeah, I
careful.
think got to be careful.
Yeah.
We can talk some solutions to that later on
Yes,
when we want to talk more
yeah,
security. So
yeah. So let's talk about S3 has a lot of things written about it. Why haven't people been writing about this multi-tenant access and partitioning and isolation before?
I don't know maybe why they haven't written about it, but I can actually tell you why I wrote about it. So one of the great things at AWS is you're just empowered to do things that need to be done. And I'm a member of the technical field and kind of the sales and marketing org. I talk to customers, so I'm empowered to be able to like, hey, here's some stuff that isn't covered well. I can write that content, get it out to customers. So I took my background that I had kind of building the multi-tenant web applications. I also work with a bunch of software as a service or SaaS subject matter experts across AWS. So I decided I was going to kind of work on this blog. I did it with you could look at it with a co-author that's on the SaaS Factory team. They're kind of a dedicated team that helps with that, and they've got lots of great content available as well. So it probably because the service has been around a while, and it's kind of a more, like I wouldn't say intro level concept. Maybe it just wasn't written up. So I decided, hey, this is something that needs to be done. So I did it. So
Yep.
lots of good documents out there if you can find them as well too. I've noticed.
Yep, yep. Is there any advice or documents? You mentioned documents. Is there any one that you'd actually, if someone's starting building SaaS, it's obviously a journey. Is there anything around that document wise you can share?
Yeah, there's actually I did spend prior to AWS some time at a startup trying to figure things out on my own. And then later, I actually found the perfect document. It's actually called the Sas Journey Framework. And again, the SaaS
Video.
Factory team put it together. And the great thing about the document, it doesn't have a bunch of answers in it. What it has is a bunch of questions in it to think about all these things to do before you start selling software. Coming from a architecture technical background, I always thought about the building and the how the bits twiddle together, and not as much as about SaaS as a business, and you have to be able to support it and sell it, and you have customers that are there. And that was just a great document that I wish I had before I started as a startup.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I want to make
yeah.
sure that everyone's out there that's kind of thinking new things about building SaaS. Go ahead and read that. Like, so there's a lot of good content out there that can help jumpstart and let you focus on the really fun technical bit twiddling.
Yeah, great. Did you like my leading question there, Kevin?
Oh, I did. That was pretty good.
It's a very cool document. I read it last night. It is very nice. Although I must be absolutely honest. When a document says white paper, I'm like, I'm not really great. It should be something like interesting stuff, interesting document. So yeah, yeah, it's it is a good document. So highly recommend using it. So anyway, I am rambling. So I like demos, right? So
I
demos is everything. Kevin, you hopefully you're in the same camp.
I like demos too. What about the chat? Do we like demos? Do we like
Any
demos or do we like
demo, just
slides?
like
Do we
yeah,
like
just
pictures or do we like code? What do we like here in the chat?
or Derry and Kevin just chatting about Star Wars and video games. Oh, that is your attitude. Thank you. Demo for
Demo
sure.
for sure.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. So I'm going to like I promise I don't have any slides here. First thing I'm actually going to demo here is I'm going to demo some diagrams that I have. Don't really worry about what's on the left here. You can
That's our
see
faces.
yeah,
They're our
well, I
faces,
meant on
Kevin.
the left
Don't
side
worry
of the
about
screen here. You can see that
that.
I can scroll through this. Don't worry about reading that. Focus on this diagram at the right. And what I've done here is that first model that we were talking about earlier, the bucket per tenant, where I have tenant one on the left, which is a group of people that are kind of from the same company. You know, I'm going to be using some terms like tenant. There's some like SaaS definitions that are important. Let's go ahead and let's drop that SaaS Lens definitions link in there so people can kind of follow up with that. That's actually another great document from the SaaS Factory team. But we'll be talking about tenants and SaaS identity and tenant isolation and data partitioning. And if you go look at that, you can kind of see the definitions we're talking about. But in this picture here, we've got two tenants, tenant one and tenant two, and there's a bunch of users in each tenant. And in here, we have the bucket per tenant model, which is where they each have their own bucket. Now, this is the same pattern that I told you before that I ran out of buckets in my quota. So this will
Yep.
work well if you've got tens or maybe hundreds of customers. But it's definitely something kind of to start with and just to kind of understand as a base level. We're going to be, I think, spending some more time talking about something known as the prefix per tenant model. And here you see we still have the same two tenants, a tenant one and tenant two, but instead of two separate buckets, we've got one shared bucket or a multi-tenant bucket. And you can kind of see it's that green box of the outline with the little bucket symbol in the corner. And in that same bucket, we've got objects or those green circles for each of the tenants. Some of them start with tenant one, some of them start with tenant two, and that's what's known as data partitioning. So I've taken the data, I've partitioned it out by the prefix of it, but all the objects are in the same spot. The
Yep.
thing I was going to just
So,
point out
so
now is,
Kevin,
oh, go ahead, Derek.
before you continue, I knew this was going to happen. We've got lots of questions about what is
Whoa.
this? Is this plant UML? How are you doing this? What's going on here? I think because everybody's going to be wondering how is this working, and they're not going to be listening to tenant isolation at all.
Yes, this is Plant UML. So I'm using Visual Studio Code. I put it into Zen mode. And the reason I put it in Zen mode was it just had less things on the screen to make it easier to demo. I'll come out of Zen mode later when I need to pull up the terminal and stuff. But I have Visual Studio Code. I've got the Plant UML plugin. And I actually have the Plant, I'm running Plant UML locally on another process, and I'm just connecting to that because I'm kind of into data security too. So I don't want my these really important critical diagrams here. I don't want them kind of shipped over the internet. So I actually run them all local because it lets me experiment with some things in Plant UML. So if you noticed it on the left, you can see kind of the syntax there. This is actually a diagram generated from code. So I wrote the text on the left and it made the picture on the right, which is kind of fun for a lot of reasons that I could probably talk another hour about, but we're here to talk S3. I just could see it on your eyes, Derek. You're like, come back to S3, Kevin, come back to me.
Come on. That's it. We were talking about keys per tenant,
Yes.
and isolating using that
Yep.
method. So let's
Right.
go back into there. If any other questions about the setup that Kevin has, put them in the chat, and we'll ask them at the end.
All right. So there is this is again prefix per tenant. Now there's another model that you can do, and it's called the database map tenant objects. And you'll see that this one looks similar. There's a shared multi-tenant bucket. It's got objects in it, but you'll notice that those objects don't have like a tenant name in it. They're just kind of a flat structure of objects. Object 1, Object 2, Object 3. You still have tenants 1 and 2 on the left, but there's some sort of service in this gray box that handles all the requests coming in, and there's some sort of mapping database that kind of says which users from which tenants have access to which objects. And we'll, if we don't run out of time in the demo, we'll kind of see how this works. But what's interesting is the more complicated your structure gets, depending on how you use S3, the more likely you're going to need some sort of mapping database, maybe to hold other things like permissions or dates or who knows kind of what type of properties about the object. So mapping database can work also with prefix per tenant. So these objects could also have the tenant prefix in it if you want, but they don't have to. So there's a lot of ways that these patterns can kind of come together.
And what any particular type? So object access service. I'm thinking maybe Amazon DynamoDB would lend itself well to this, or
Yeah,
would it be a traditional SQL database if you're looking at that?
So for this database, I left it just kind of as a generic looking database. In solutions I've used DynamoDB for a lot of them. I like the kind of the serverless nature or the pay per request part of it. If you're migrating applications in and you already have a relational data model, sometimes relational works great, and you can use something maybe like even like an Aurora Postgres and Aurora MySQL that kind of have a serverless nature too. So we talked earlier about access patterns. I think one of the most important things is how you're using the data. Is it kind of a key value lookup? Is it reporting? And all the purpose-built databases we have on AWS kind of help decide what that is. So that's why this gray box, it's kind of an intentionally vague object access service with a mapping database. Maybe it's a container, maybe it's a Lambda function, maybe it's your own process that's running. The idea is there's some sort of proxy between the tenants and accessing the objects.
Yeah, cool. Obviously, yeah. There's probably a caveat that this database must be highly available and scalable as well. So yeah, that also impact what services you want to use as it. So that's great, Kevin. What's next in the demo?
what's next, since we are talking about object access service, I'm going to show 2 pictures, and then I'm going to go like show how like they work. Okay. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this picture called access token. And it's kind of Amazon S3 objects using an access token. So here we've got our user from tenant 1 on the left. And that Lambda function kind of in the middle is our object service. So that's the service that the user is going to go through to go ahead and get the object out of that S3 bucket. The user will logs into an identity provider. Here we have Amazon Cognito. They get back an access token, and then they send that access token and the object they want to the service. It does the validation. It finds out stuff about the user, and then it goes and gets the object out of the bucket. So this kind of picture here maps really well against that database mapped objects with the object access service here. And you can see too that these is another set of plant UML diagrams. So diagrams is code. You can see all the nice pretty icons with color and pictures that show up there, including the stuff to the kind of the left. So I'm actually kind of proud of this. If I'm going to get my color printer, I'm going to print it off. I'd put it on the fridge, but we just got a new fridge and I'm not allowed to put anything on it. So
No,
I guess
You've
I'm
got
gonna
about
have to,
6 months
yeah,
until it's not a new
yeah,
fridge anymore.
yeah. So I've been told, don't touch the fridge. It's new. No, nothing goes on the fridge. So, but
Wow.
if I was allowed, I would print out this color diagram just to look at it. So,
Yeah,
but that's
it's pretty.
kind of a pattern, and I think a lot of people that are building services think about this pattern. They think about a session token or an access token that comes in, and they look at it in their service, and they pop it open, and they look at it and they give the permission. So I think I'm a little. I'll tell you about a secret. That Hawksbane
Yeah.
that you just live commented. That
Yeah.
may or may not be my daughter that owns this gaming PC back here.
Nice,
So
nice. Hi,
and was
Hawksbian. Welcome.
and was the one that forced me to buy this like artwork down in the corner there too, that I have
It's
nicely staged for my live streams.
yeah,
So,
really good taste. Really good taste. Yeah. Okay. So that's the diagram.
yeah.
Can we see it working?
Yes,
I'm
let's
gonna
see a
more
couple
to
of things.
this.
You know what? I'm going to show one more diagram, and then I'm
Okay.
just for reference, and then I'm going to show working. I'm not even going to
Okay.
talk
I just
too
got
much.
I got too excited
Yeah.
by this flow. I want to see
So
it working.
here is the next the similar diagram to the other one, but this diagram actually exchanges some tokens for temporary credentials, and then it gets the objects. So we can just look at this here for a second, and then I'm actually just going to go and run some code and get some tokens. So we can kind of get out of we're going to get out of diagramming mode, and we're going to go get into
Write something.
write something. All right. Turn off my Zen mode. We're gonna go over here, and I've got.
So this is the AWS console if nobody's seen it before, and this is the Cognito service. I believe.
No,
Am I right?
this is
No.
see, look at my local host up here. So this is a custom.
Inspector.
This is a
Oh, you got
custom tool
Inspector.
that I use when I'm playing around.
Yeah.
And I've got a Cognito user pool kind of configured here already. Can we see? Do we need to zoom in here? Or can we?
Yeah, zoom in a little bit. So did you build this custom UI with the new set of open
It is
source
using the
components that we just
Cloudscape
released?
design system.
Yeah.
Yes,
Nice.
I had previously created this with the old style, but then when that came out last month, I decided to switch it over, and it looks pretty. Like if I have to come up with it from scratch, does not look pretty.
Yep.
When I was able to use this system pretty. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to log in as a couple users and get some tokens back, and then we're going to take those tokens. We're not going to show them to you on the screen so you steal them from me.
Let's not do that.
But we're going to use those to then call S3 with some code we have. So I'm going to click here this hosted UI authentication, and it's going to have me come over, and
Sorry, Kevin. I'm just going to
Yeah.
put some information about Cloudscape. If anybody wants to build a UI that looks like Kevin's, there's a good start.
All
So,
right.
sorry, jumping in all the time.
So I'm logging in as tenant one, user one. So T1U1. I'm going to click sign in here. What I have is actually, after I signed it, it brought me back to my app, and it's giving me some of these tokens, giving me this ID token and giving me an access token. And we can talk about tokens all day too. You can see here that I'm super conscious about what I'm showing on the screen. So I built redacted mode into my tool so that you can't just screen grab my tokens, throw them with your textract API, and then grab my token. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add these tokens. And then let me just, while I'm here, I think I'm going to go back and I'm going to go get a second set of tokens too. I'm going to sign as a different user and I'm going to sign in as tenant 2 user 1. Those tokens, add those as well. And now I've got a couple sets of tokens. What I'm going to do now is we're going to look here at this token. It's an access token, and when we look at the claims, we'll see that this is tenant 1 user 1. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I don't need to
So
kind of worry.
if anybody hasn't used JWT before, yeah, a quick explanation of what it is.
Yeah. So there's JWT is a token standard. It's right there in the description. I can even read it from my own stuff. It's a kind of a compact URL safe means of representing claims to be transferred to two parties. So there is well-known protocols like OAuth and OpenID Connect, and Cognito supports those, and it's able to give us tokens back. What's interesting on tokens is there's a couple of things you need to do to tokens, right? If you have a token like this, you need to be able to verify it to make sure that it's still good. And then if you have a token, you can oftentimes then go to like an endpoint, like a user info endpoint I have here, and then I can call it and I can get back information about the token. So I'm going to do this verification quick on a couple of these just to go ahead and get some credentials so that I can cut and paste some things into my credentials over here so I can run some demos on it. Okay. So we're going to go here. We're going to grab my user 1. I'm going to go ahead and copy this one.
I love rejected mode, by the way. It's my favorite new thing.
Yeah, I'm going to paste that in there. Okay. I'm going to go over here to the other access token. Sure, we'll verify it. Is it good? It's still good. Check our user info. Yep, it's tenant 2. Go grab the JWT because I'm grabbing these access tokens. I'm going to copy that. I'm setting it up. I'm pasting it over here on the side so I can use it. And then while we're on this screen, I'm just going to do 2 more things. These are ID tokens, and ID tokens are different than access tokens in that ID tokens I need to verify. But with an ID token, I can actually exchange it for AWS Identity and Access Management temporary security credentials. So I can actually take an ID token, turn it into AWS credentials that'll go ahead and let me actually access the S3 bucket. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click that button. It's going to get me some credentials. I'm going to do the second thing over here to this token. I'm going to get those credentials. I'm going to close some of the pop-ups here. And now I've grabbed these tokens. I'm going to take these 2 access tokens later when we get to the demo, and I'm going to like use them to get some S3 objects.
Yep. And this source code, Kevin, can people get access to it if they want to run this?
This not yet. So this is I'm in the process now of trying to get this get it working better. get it security reviewed. But then kind of my plan is to be able to get this tool and get it out in one of our AWS samples or our labs area, one of our open source areas, so people can use it. One of the things that I, in addition to redacted mode, one of the things that I like is to be able to run stuff local, because I don't like to be able to paste my tokens or do stuff out on somebody's internet site. So I really feel like being able to pull the stuff local and run yourself there. So this is kind of a preview of what it might look like, but it really helps me when I'm debugging.
Yep.
So
Nice.
Now I popped over here to my temporary credentials tab, and you'll see that I've got my users here. I've got my user T1. I can actually go over here to this AWS CLI tab that I have, which, look at that, redacted. I'm going to go ahead and copy some stuff, paste it over here into my place that I'm going to load them from, and then I'm going to do the same thing to my user 2.
I like 512's comment about redacted mode. You can be authenticated, but you're never authorized. I like it. I like it.
Yeah. All right. So now that I've got all these credentials ready, I've got them ready to load so I can run some demos. Let's pop back over to Visual Studio Code. Let's pop up some terminals and let's see what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close out of that. Looks like I got a lot of things to close.
All the tabs. You get all the tabs.
All the tabs.
Yeah.
All right. So I have got. Oh, I had over here on the side pasted all my credentials and all my stuff into a file named creds.txt.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
So, and the reason I did that is when I source the file, it'll basically run all the things for me. But if I keep doing up arrows or scroll up and down, you're not going to be able to see the tokens come to the side too. So that was just kind of a way to, when you're doing demos, making sure the security is in place there. So I did that for tenant 1. I'm also going to wait for my tenant 2 while I'm waiting here. So two separate bash shells. Okay. Both set up. I've got with the AWS CLI, you can have separate profiles, and a profile will let it use a specific set of access keys, session secret access keys, session tokens. So I've got separate profiles set up for each of these just to make it easy for typing. You can put -- profile at the end, but I have them set up for each one. And what I've kind of like to do too is I'll echo in my prompt what my current profile is, because oftentimes I'm working in a lot of accounts with a lot of different profiles, and I just want that visual indicator that this is tenant 1 user 1 profile, and this is tenant 2 user 1 profile.
Yeah,
so
that's very handy.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to just copy some stuff here because my typing's kind of poor. And this is going to go ahead and it's going to list the objects from the bucket. And I went and I already had exported out the name of the bucket that we're dealing with and an object URL and a bunch of stuff just that's long for simplicity. So I'm going to
basically we're simulating what would happen in the real world if you had this SaaS application deployed and you were trying to access across tenants.
So this is tenant 1 getting their own data, and there's 2 objects in each side, and I got the ones I've looked for. If I go to tenant 2 and I paste that same thing in there, I'm going to get access denied because tenant 2 can't get the objects from tenant 1. But if I go over here, I change the prefix, and I can go ahead and I can get the objects.
Nice. So the one question I have, Kevin, about this pattern is, so way back at the start we talked about the limits for S3 and number of buckets. What sort of limits would we potentially run into if we tried to implement this pattern?
So the there isn't a limit for the number of objects or the size of kind of the objects, but there are some throttling that happens if you've got a tenant getting a lot of data at the same time. So in cases where maybe they're not getting it from the web, but maybe you're running some machine learning job or some data analytics job where it's trying to get a lot of data from the same prefix in the bucket, it actually can kind of run into some throttling. There's numbers in the blog. It's like 3,500 requests a second for one of them, like 5,000 for the other. So that's kind of one of the limits that you can kind of run into. The other kind of limit that can come up is when you're trying to get the stuff isolated. So we kind of, by doing this demo, we actually transitioned from two topics from that SaaS definition. The way the data was separated, that's data partitioning. But data partitioning itself isn't what prevented one tenant from getting the other tenant's data. That's a concept known as tenant isolation. And tenant isolation works well because it keeps it from happening. And in this case, our tenant isolation uses the native AWS security of the identity and access management rules to be able to separate those two. There are also limits in that. This one is set up in a certain way that won't hit those limits. If you had custom policies for every tenant, that could hit the limits. So I'm going to pop over and I'm going to show the policy that looks like this. I'm going to pop over. I'm going to go back to my user. I'm going to go back to my token. I'm going to go over to my access token. I'm going to look at my user info. And when we look at these claims that show up, and they're just attributes, they're things about the user, we'll see that there's this one called tenant ID, and its value is T1. So this particular user's got this attribute on it with this specific name with this specific value. And what we've done from a security point of view in this policy is we've actually mapped those claims over to something known as a principal tag. But I'm looking for that same tenant ID, and I'm making sure that after the bucket, the first segment of the object name or the prefix has to match the same value that showed up in that token. And because this is dynamic in that it takes it from the token and it replaces the value here, this single policy works for all tenants, which if you looked at these temporary credentials, you might actually see that tenant 2 and tenant 1 have exactly the same IAM role, which might make you think they have access to the same things, but they don't because of this extra policy that's in place.
Nice. That's a very nice way of implementing that. Very
now,
nice.
There's sometimes when you need to do things a little different. There's something known as dynamic policies. And I'm sure Bill Tarr will drop the link of that awesome blog that he wrote into the chat at some point, because that's
Are you still there, Bill?
If Bill's still awake, he'll drop that link in for us. So that's one of the ones. But yeah, so there's a couple ways to do it. And I think what's important is just understanding all the different tools that you can have regarding to kind of building your architecture in kind of in AWS and getting the right security in place.
Nice. Great demo. Is there any other demos you got for us, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm going to now.
I like demos. Just keep going.
So I'm going to go grab this line right here. Okay. And we're going to make this a little bigger, and then we're going to go tenant 2, and we're going to paste it in there. And it's got a curl command. So curl command will do a HTTP call. And in this curl command, I'm taking a header and setting the authorization header. And that header, a lot of times for security reasons, and it's putting a bearer token. So when I was over copying those JWTs for tenant 1 and tenant 2, I replaced these tokens. So this is the tenant 2 user 1 token.
Mhm.
And now I'm calling I'm calling a URL that's a Lambda function that goes and gets it for me. And I'm passing in that access token. And if we remember kind of that sequence diagram I have, this is the object service. So that Lambda function is working as the object service. It took the access token coming in, it grabbed it off the header, it did a verification to make sure that it was still valid from day, so the signature was good. It grabbed the user info the same way as we did in there. It pulled out the tenant ID, and you'll see that even though that the key that I passed in at the end here was just o1.text, so object1.text, it
Yep.
actually prefixed the T2 in the object service and went and got the right object.
Yep. Very
So,
cool.
um,
And that Lambda function itself, what sort of access does it need on the bucket? Will it need full access?
yeah, so that is that function has full access to the full bucket because it needs to be able to get at all the objects for the bucket. So this is kind of the challenge between the two security models. In the one security model, you have an access token, and with an access token in the browser, you can't get you can't get credentials. You can only get that with an ID token. So for some reasons, an access token is kind of safer to have in the browser because you can do less with it.
Yep.
But you send it in and you exchange it, but then you have to your server side module is the one that has to be smart about it and has to have really good security, because if there's bugs there or mistakes there, you could expose the wrong data. So
Yep.
then you might think, okay, well then the other model's better. The ID token model is better because I have the ID token, I exchange it for temporary credentials, and now I can call things directly. Well, maybe you don't want your users to be able to have direct access from it. Maybe they won't be able to apply the logic that they can. Maybe there's other things you want to do in that database mapping. So I think there's different use cases for each one. I know that temporary credentials work well for maybe mobile apps where you
Mhm.
have kind of something on your phone and you just want to go get the data directly because you're doing the processing there. So like I
Yep.
said, your access pattern and your security model really kind of help choose kind of which way do you go. Do I roll it myself with an access token? Do I use temporary credentials?
Yeah, for sure. Being a front-end mobile developer for a very long time, definitely not exposing anything from your application into the device, the local device, is the recommended way of doing things. So I'd always go for pattern two there, where I'm, that access to the buckets is being delegated
Yep.
via the Lambda. Very cool.
Yep.
Anything else, Kevin? What else we
Um,
got?
no, I was just going to say I pasted that same command, um,
Mhm.
key equals o1 with tenant one using tenant one's access token, and you can see here that I got a different object. Right? See, I'll go to
Nice.
tenant one. You'll see it's tenant one at the bottom. I'll go to tenant two. You'll see it's tenant two at the bottom. So
Cool.
it's kind of like the same URL got different data because the logic was in that function. So
Cool. Cool. Yeah. Should we talk about use cases next? Just
yeah,
thinking we've got 10 minutes left.
yeah,
So we did allude to, and we talked about, use cases when you would maybe mobile, you would use the database access model or in that use case. But what about industries? So they're generic use cases. But what about specific
yeah.
industries? If we came across specific industries that may be tied to a particular use case.
Yeah, so I end up working with a lot of gov tech companies, or work with state and local governments building software that it's used in those jurisdictions. And many times when they're, like I said, in the US, we only have like 50 US states, and we got some territories and we got some federal agencies. So if you think about some of those software companies, the number of total customers that they sell to is probably like in that tens to hundreds, even if they had all the states. So with those customers, the bucket per tenant model and just getting that really strict isolation ends up being a good model for those customers. They also have a better chance selling to the government customers because they feel better about the security. Plus, those customers are sometimes larger, and they would maybe hit the throttling limits. So So that's an industry where the bucket per tenant model actually works out right. You might, think that you should never do it because the prefix works so much better, but there's actually cases, depending on your access patterns, where that makes sense. Kind of on the other hand, when we talked about the kind of the mobile, or maybe it's the social, or it's the sign up, where you're just having lots and lots of users, maybe all being their own tenant. Maybe every family's their own tenant, right? And family sharing is your 4, 5, 6 users. Then you're going to run out of buckets. Then you're going to have to get kind of the prefix model in place. But you also might have different kind of sharing, like head of household might be able to get it all stuff, but the kids can't. So then maybe you do need that database mapped object too. So I think, like I said, the industry and the use cases and the access patterns you brought up earlier, I think really tie into kind of which model to do and what to look for.
Yeah, cool. We did talk about so that's we've got particular use cases for particular industries, particular applications. What about, we talked about rate limiting as a potential problem that we may run into when implementing these solutions, or any other gotchas or things to be aware of when you're implementing these solutions?
Yeah, I think when we were doing this demo today, we kind of treated all users in the tenant the same. So if users need to have different permissions, or different objects have different permissions, like some are read, some are write, I kind of alluded to the more complex logic there. You can kind of run into some of the patterns. If you're using the kind of the temporary credentials or the IAM policy model, that's where it gets complicated to put all that in there. If you have more of that complex logic, you're gonna, I feel, need more of the object access service style model, where you're kind of looking at the data, making decisions yourself. Maybe still get in some tenant isolation underneath it, but the more logic you have there. So that's, I think, the like the pattern you kind of need to worry about too. What's going on there?
Nice. So we're coming to the end. Well, we've got 8 minutes left, Kevin. I just put the question out. If any other questions for Kevin, please put them in the chat and we can ask them. But we touched at the beginning about how big a service S3 actually is, and this is one way we can use it. But is it worth actually going through what other features of S3 you think are interesting?
Yeah,
why not?
There's a couple things. So, security is important. So this almost not a feature of S3, but we have other services. One of my favorite one is Amazon Guard Duty, and I always recommend people, you strongly consider turning on your S3 protection, because that's baked into Guard Duty. So that's not an S3 feature as much as it's a feature that helps your S3 and keeps that public bucket thing from happening. There was, encryption is also important. There was actually something that last reInvent where they turned on something called bucket keys, and it was just a good cost savings measure, where Amazon S3 would just be more efficient on how it was getting your encryption keys, and it would still encrypt and rotate them, but it would have up to like a 99% reduction in cost or something. It was pretty crazy. And then even last week, I just saw an announcement that there's a feature called access points that had come out for S3. And in my blog, it said 1,000 is the limit. Now it's 10,000. Like 6 weeks old, and my blog is already wrong too. It's 10,000, and they added even more services that could use these access points, and they're almost just like aliases for buckets that let you put another policy. We didn't get a chance to kind of demo that today, but they work really well for other types of things. S3, it's constantly evolving, even though it's been around for like 16 plus years. And it's just it's amazing how much stuff goes into it and how complicated S3 is. If there's one last thing I would say for people to watch that isn't you and I on Twitch here, it's go back, and hopefully we have the link. The reInvent keynote from kind of last December, that Peter DeSantis talked about how S3 works and how the storage works. And how many hard drives you need to be able to get the capacity and the throughput you need, and at the scale that we have, how the data is all moved around. So that was just a kind of incredible insight on how much data is stored in S3 across it. So
Just find the link. There it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Still a lot of innovation. So even though S3 has been around a long time, it seems like they're constantly adding a new features that are kind of helping customers build solutions.
Nice, nice. Well, we had a few people who just joined at the end, and sorry, Rudex World. What have you missed? You've missed the show. So you've missed. Kevin had some fantastic patterns and demos on how to isolate S3 data across multi-tenants in a SaaS solution. But you can get it all on demand. So if you missed the episode and indeed previous episodes, we have. It's all on demand. That's a terrible URL. So I'll post that. That's just horrible. What was I thinking when I did that? I'll post that in the chat as well if you're interested in watching the on-demand version of this as well. So, Kevin, I think we're running to the end. Is there any last thoughts? Anything you'd like to end on?
I don't know. If you love those diagrams, the AWS icons for Plant UML. I don't have any of them up right now, but you can definitely find some stuff related to that. And again, just kind of build stuff, play with stuff, but be secure and don't let your tokens don't share your tokens with the world.
Yeah. And Hawksbean really loved your presentation, Kevin. I don't know how much you paid them, but worth every penny. No, seriously though, it was actually a really insightful session, Kevin. Thanks for really helping really articulate. Definitely your daughter. So if anybody really helped articulate what is can be quite a complex thing, but we made it look really, really simple. So thanks for joining us. And Bill is going to pay Hawksbean for turning up. So so thank you very much, sir, for joining us in building SaaS on AWS. And we'll wash up now before I lose it. So yeah, thanks for joining us. We'll be back again soon for the next episode. Bill, who will tell us when that is because I've forgotten. And hopefully we will see you back again for building SaaS on AWS. Thanks again to Kevin.
Sure.
And yeah, that's it. And thanks to Hawksbean for watching and everybody else who watched the show. I hope it's as insightful as I found it. And the next episode is on the 17th of August. Thank you, Bill. So we'll see you then. So thanks again. And,
all right.
Bye from Derek.
Bye from Kevin.
Thanks, Si. Bye. If we can, I'm just finding the right button to press. This is it. See ya.